What if the biggest thing holding back your growth isn't a lack of effort, but trying to do everything yourself? My guest today has spent more than 25 years in performance marketing and managed over $1 billion in ad spend. Last year alone, his team oversaw $220 million in media, and his core insight is simple: you can't DIY your way to a scalable business. Today, we'll talk about that shift from good enough to strategic delegation can mean the difference between a plateau and breakthrough growth. So today, I'm so excited to be joined by
Borja Cuan.
Borja, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I like to lead with the question, since we're building thinkers: what is it that you build? And what brought you to co-founding 415 Digital and that work?
Yeah, so I ultimately found myself working in-house for a company based in San Francisco, where I was part of a growth team overseeing an advertising budget of about $120 million a year. And it was there that I met my current business partner, Mike Nelson. He and I overlapped there for 2 years, and I left the company. And shortly after I left, we got together and came up sort of with the idea of starting an agency. And because of all the experiences each of us had in digital marketing and really being on the buy side of the industry, buy and sell side, but on the buy side, we had always engaged with agencies. So we were evaluating agencies, we worked with agencies. We always felt somewhat underwhelmed by the service that we received, and then felt that with our experience and collective connections that we would be successful in starting an agency. We did not know how big that agency would become, but we weren't really worried about that. We just were interested in starting an agency, getting our first customer, and doing a really good job. And we knew that if we did that, that would lead to more business.
A lot of our listeners are in the service industry space as entrepreneurs. And so I'd love to kind of start weaving our conversation that way. And as you think about some of your lessons learned, and this could be either from your own as the entrepreneur or the things that haven't worked when you've hired out, other services. And I've had the same experience of being kind of underwhelmed with services that I've paid for. What are some of those lessons learned or any stories you can share around what is most important in getting rolling with a service industry? Where would you start us on that pathway?
I think what we recognized very early is one of the things that we disliked about agencies that we had worked with in the past is we felt that the salespeople did a very good job in selling the service. But what we felt underwhelmed by was really what happened after the sales process was behind us, and we were actually now working with a services organization. And there was always a disconnect between what we thought we were going to get and what we actually got. So we made the commitment to ourselves where we said, hey, we are going to be obsessive over customer retention. We care very much about keeping a customer as long as we possibly can. We know that we're not going to have customers that stay with us forever, but we really want to focus on how do we have really good retention rates in this industry, in this category. And so we knew from the onset that was a priority for our business. And so, we made absolutely sure that by getting, once we got the business, we were just very, very focused and committed to doing what was necessary to keep the business, which in our world is really two things. It's driving results and then also building relationship. And it's probably in that order, because no matter how much a customer likes us and enjoys spending time with us on a call or in person, we have to drive outcomes for their business, and that typically means scaling and helping them scale. So it's really those two things. So because of that, we know what is the most important thing in our business to retain our customer, and we focus very heavily on making sure that we're very good at those two things.
Yeah, I'm wondering if another piece of it that you've seen is around communication of the expectations. So like do
Mhm.
you see a gap in the service industry between that sales team and the team that's executing? And how have you all tried to, close that gap?
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, I would say communication to me is the single most important skill set someone can have.
Mhm.
I always say that to the team. I want you to have the hard skills. You need to have hard skills to do what you do in your job. But if you have the hard skills but are not capable of communicating that in a way that our customers understand or that is effective, then it doesn't really matter. So yes, expectation setting is critical, right? So and I'm very involved in the sales process for our business, and I make absolutely sure that whatever I say or whatever promise I make as a salesperson, that we're going to actually deliver that, so that there's never a situation where my team comes to me and says, "Hey, Borja, the client said we were going to do this, but I don't even have this in my scope of work. Like, what happened here?" Right? So there's a lot of really clear expectation setting during the sales process. But also, once you kick off an engagement with your client, it's really important to be clear on what each of us have in terms of expectations, because we have a role, but just because we're the vendor provider doesn't mean the client doesn't also have a role in making this a successful partnership. So partnership is really two people coming together and collaborating and driving outcomes. It's not one or the other. It's really both of us. And so we're very, in terms of our process, whenever we kick off an engagement, it's one of the first questions we always want to understand is, how do you evaluate us as a vendor? How do we know if we're doing a good job for you? Is it sort of a number we have to hit, or is it a deliverable we have to provide, or is it both of those things? So being very clear on how we're being evaluated is always really important in our business. And then also setting the expectation to that client on what they should expect from us in terms of communication cadence. Like, how do we get a hold of you? How often are we going to be talking? When we talk, what will we be covering, right? Mm-hmm. And then making sure that they are sort of aligned with that, right? Because not every customer wants to talk every week. Some customers say, "Hey, I'd rather talk every 2 weeks." Or frankly, I want to talk to you once a month, and in between just email each other. So I think it's very bespoke in how you deliver services. I think there's like a standard scope of work, but then everything is subject to how that customer wants to work with you. And so there has to be this conversation that takes place in sort of, being an agreement on what the best way to do that is.
I love that. I found that to be true in my own work as well. And I take a lot of time in the scope of work phase to make sure each line item within there is really clear, and go back and forth there, because that's, what's the backbone of knowing, have we delivered on what we said we were going to do? And we can always go back to that, make adjustments that we agree upon. But I find that piece to sometimes be rushed through in some service industries to like get to the deal being closed, rather than thinking about the long term of the relationship, to your point, so that it is successful for both sides.
Exactly. Yeah. And by the way, on that point, I would just add, it's really important also to be communicative about where we're spending our time, because sometimes the customer will ask us to do what I call non-revenue generating activity, or non-needle moving activity. So there are times when a customer has us doing a lot of busy work that doesn't really impact the revenue. And we always have to make the customer aware that this is sort of a distraction. So I think in any good engagement, when someone hires us, our job is to not tell them what they want to hear, but instead tell them what we think is best for their business. So if they're asking us to do things that are not going to help the business move forward, but it's eating up the time we've allocated for that customer, we should let them know what the impact is by us not focusing on the most important things, but let them decide. So if you'd rather me run reports and do these PowerPoints, I can do that, but I want you to know it comes at the cost of doing the things that we want to do to optimize the campaign, because we don't have unlimited time, right? So it's about using our time best. And sometimes that requires us to push back on the customer and make them aware that this request is really not important and should be sort of deprioritized. But that is a lot of where we spend time training and coaching the team on how to do that, because the truth is a lot of people don't know how to manage a client or push back, right? They want to provide really good service, but sometimes what they don't understand is by doing that, you're actually hurting more than you're helping, because you're not going to get the desired outcome that you're hoping to get.
I've seen that to also be true in communication within organizations when, let's say, an employee is trying to lead up to their manager and they are being asked to do this or that. And when they're able to communicate, to your point, those priorities, and if I do this, this is the trade-off here, that really helps them to thrive, in that relationship. And I've seen that specific communication skill be targeted by organizations to work on as an area of importance. Borja, I'm wondering if we can go into kind of the digital marketing side for a moment and think about, okay, so listeners who may be entrepreneurs and this is not their area of expertise, are there lessons learned for people at that level? And then maybe we can go further into folks that are at maybe more of your clientele that are at perhaps the higher end. I don't know, based on what I read about the types of clients that you have. So let's start with entrepreneurs of smaller businesses that are right now in that DIY space that you spoke about on LinkedIn, trying to do it themselves. What would you say in that area are maybe some lessons learned, or if they only knew?
If you're launching a business and you're trying to drive customer acquisition, but you don't have the experience in digital marketing, the answer to that is align yourself with someone who is an expert that can guide you and direct you, teach you, whatever it is, because at the end of the day, either you have to learn this craft or you need to partner with someone that's an expert, right? That has the knowledge or competency. There's no way around it. Either you have to become that subject matter expert or you need to hire someone that can do it for you, right? And there are inexpensive ways or less expensive ways to find a resource to assist you, right? There's a lot of, there's Upwork, and there are these third-party sites that you can find people that have the background or experience, but maybe aren't as expensive because they're doing it on a consultancy basis or they're doing it 5 hours a week, right? So the cost to do that is much less than hiring a full-time equivalent where you have to pay a salary and benefits and all of those other things. So if you're kind of looking to get into digital marketing, maybe partner with someone that can come in and do it on a few hours a week. But even before doing that, I would be really dialed in with having a good website. Like, think about where you're sending traffic to once you decide to spend money on ads. So before you even spend money on advertising, make sure that you have a really good website, right, with all the information that you want to put out there. And then you have a page within that website where you can drive traffic to help generate conversions for you. And then if you do that, it's also important to make sure that you have the right tracking in place so that you are tracking and measuring the effectiveness of your advertising. And I think oftentimes a lot of people that are starting out in advertising, they overlook the fundamentals or just building out the right foundation or the infrastructure needed to measure the effectiveness of the advertising. So it's always really important to spend time on building the right website, building the right pages, coming up with the right offer, messaging, understanding who your audience is as well is really important when you have a business, because depending on who it is, you're going to have to figure out what are the channels or platforms that attract those customers, because you want to be advertising on those platforms and not waste money advertising on platforms that are attracting a different demographic. So yeah, those are some of the things that I would recommend.
What do you see people get wrong? Like when maybe customers come to you and they came because they're fed up, they tried it themselves, they tried with other partners, they tried on Upwork, and now they come to you. What does that look like? What are some of the things that they've done wrong?
I think a lot of people have a misconception or misunderstanding that you kind of like turn the light switch on and sales come in. Yeah. They don't understand, like, this is a game of patience and testing, and it requires a high tolerance for seeing things through, right? So I think a lot of times people get very kind of disappointed if they don't see the results that they were hoping for in a couple of weeks when it doesn't take that long, which is why, going back to the conversation we had a few minutes ago, it's really important to do a good job of expectation setting, right? Because I always let people know we need to be committed to this project for at least 3 months. And during those 3 months, we're going to do a lot of testing. We're going to do a lot of optimization. We're going to be we'll be having signals along the way that tell us how things are doing and that allow us to make pivots. But in general, we need to commit to this for 3 months or we're not going to have a successful engagement. So I think a lot of times I'm always surprised because a lot of people, don't have the patience and understanding that this is a little bit of a long game thing. Oftentimes they don't have a real clear understanding of who their target audience is. Like they haven't defined that. They don't really know who they're going after. They don't know oftentimes what the success metrics are or what the goals that they have are. So I'll say, okay, what do you hope to accomplish? And like, oh, I don't know. Or what do you want your desired customer acquisition cost to be? And they don't know. So knowing the key metrics for your business is really important because that's the only way we know if we're doing well or not, right? If we don't know that, then we don't know if this is the right, the goal we should be setting. So I think it's some of those things.
Yeah, I hear in that, perhaps this posture of experimentation. That's what I like to call that sense, which this is not my area of expertise, so I don't know to what extent it's true. But what I hear is in that optimization and checking on the metrics, that going into it as a bit of an experiment. I mean, there are, of course, terms and variables that you can be an expert around, but does it move so quickly? And in particular, at our moment in time with AI and everything that's exponentially changing, is so much of it that trial and error that drives the back end?
No, it is. And I think for clients, what I always say is, if I were you, the things that I would care about most as I evaluated an agency is, are they ethical? Of course, that's important. And then do they have the ability, because the competency is there, to be the best capable of driving success? And then how do we determine that? We do very bespoke proposals, which are essentially business audits. So we're going to look at your business. We're going to take a peek under the hood. You have to give us permission and access, but through NDAs, we'll get permission and access to look at what you're currently doing across all the ad platforms. And then we're going to tell you the good, the bad, the ugly, not based on opinion, but based on math and experience. And there's no way to disguise your knowledge at that point, because we're talking very specifically about that business and what they're doing that we agree with or disagree with and why. And then most importantly, what we would do if we were in the driver's seat, right? So how would we take this business and really catapult it?
One of the things that stood out to me, I listened to a couple other conversations you had, and you were talking about this idea of how you support your employees within your agency, and talking about this idea of overwhelm. And you mentioned this thought that when people are overwhelmed, like employees, so as the entrepreneur hat and leader hat, it's I think you said the totality of life, not just the work side. And this really resonates with me as somebody who loves life design and building like flourishing life. And I have some content around this and have done work in this space, and am also always trying to optimize, for better or for worse, my own life and family as much as they'd like me to stop. So with all that set up, I'm curious if we can shift to, as the leader, as co-founder, when you're thinking about how you lead your employees well, can you speak more to this idea of like the totality of life and how you see that within your company?
I think it's so important for the employees at my company to be healthy human beings, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, because I think life is stressful, right? As you get older and you have more responsibility, whether you get married, whether you have children, you buy your first home, life just inevitably gets more stressful and frankly more difficult. But difficulty doesn't have to equate to bad. So with the team, I always tell them I only control, let's call it 8 hours of your day. And by control, I don't mean I control it. It just means I have influence over it, meaning I know what you're doing. I know what you're working on. We talk, we spend time together. Like I kind of have an idea of what's going on. But then what are you doing with the remaining hours of your day, right? The remaining 16 hours of your day. And I don't have any influence. And frankly, it's none of my business what you do when you're not at work. That's crossing the line. Right? Now, I would hope when you're leaving work that you're doing something that you like, that brings you happiness, that, whether it's meeting up with a friend or going for a walk or playing video games, whatever it is that you do to escape and re-energize makes me happy. I just want you to do that. So I really spend a lot of time understanding how people are doing. And it's really just not very complicated. It's just building relationships with the team. And it's also making sure that you're there to support them and guide them, because oftentimes what I find is a lot of stress that people that I have talked to have is self-created. It doesn't really exist. It's almost there unnecessarily, right? And so a lot of times it's about coaching them and listening to them and giving them guidance on things that then they kind of realize, oh God, so I shouldn't be worried about this, or I don't really need to do this today. This can wait until tomorrow, or I thought I needed to do this today. So there's this constant misunderstanding or self-creation of stress that can be avoided through simple conversations with your team. It makes you better at everything in your life when you take care of yourself. Because I think if you can do that, then you'll be not only a better person overall, but you'll be happier.
Yeah. I love that, Borja. I want to go into one of the concepts that was within there, which was this idea of normalizing difficulty and pain. And it's interesting because I think that theme has come up on just some different podcasts I've listened to recently. I think it was on Diary of a CEO. He had several entrepreneurs on, and two of them were saying that they think entrepreneurs, the biggest skill set or superpower is the ability to handle pain. Like they use the word pain, difficulty. And I think that this is something that I remember. So a therapist told me once that I wanted to avoid anything difficult. And it was very eye-opening to me. Like everything was optimizing around like some recovering perfectionism and trying to avoid the difficult thing. And while I saw it at that time as like, I work really hard, I have great work ethic, what's the problem? I didn't see the side of it that was rooted in fear or insecurity or not shipping things or not taking the rest to go out, for opportunities and things like that at the time. That flipped a switch for me to recognize that it is in that difficulty. Even if I think about just learning science, it's under the weight of like productive struggle or just weightlifting. You literally put yourself underweight, tear your muscles so they can rebuild. Same theme goes across. And so I'm wondering, do you think that this is a mindset shift for people that's particularly important for entrepreneurs and leaders, or everyone? Anything else around that?
You don't need to have a business to have a lot of stress. You could have stress because of your relationship, because of your family, because of your children. Like there are all of these things going on, right? That are going to create stress in your life. And I think, and even me, living in a community in the Bay Area where I see other families and talk to other parents, they're dealing with stress from just sports and school, right? Like it's the politics of things. And there's all this other stuff. I embrace stress because I know it's inevitable and it will happen, right? And so what I say to myself is stress is going to be part of my life forever. The more responsibility I take on, the more stress that will come with it. The more home projects I do, the more stress that will come from it. What I'm doing is acknowledging it's going to be there. So how do I prepare myself so when it comes, I'm ready?
Right.
Really? So that's how I think about stress, pain, and suffering. It's going to happen to all of us. So how can we put ourselves in a situation to be best prepared to deal with it and manage through it? I found, unfortunately, that a lot of times people, when the going gets tough at a company, they pull the ripcord, right? They don't see it through because they think this is not normal. They don't realize that every company not every company, but most companies operate the same way. It's just like, grass isn't greener type of thing.
Right.
I'd say like 50% of my job description I hate, right? Like, it's like, but I deal with it and I embrace it. And I always say, I like the good and the bad that comes with being an entrepreneur, because you can't just get highs off of the victories.
Right.
And so you just have to go in knowing. And that's why I try to talk people out of starting a business to see if they really want to, right? You just have to know, like, that's part of having a business. Like, it's not going to be this smooth, straight line.
One of the things that I saw also in your history is that you played sports in college. And this is another theory that I have around, just maybe it's the scrappiness or something about playing sports. And do you have any connections there that you've seen of what you learned from being an athlete that you bring to your work or life?
I have felt that a lot of the folks that played sports, they have this competitiveness that I like to see in the business workplace. Right? There's this drive, there's this competitiveness that they have. And a lot of people associate competition as bad. And I try to change that in our culture, where I felt even at times like we played too nicely together. And I said, guys, conflict is very healthy, despite you thinking you have to avoid it. Like, conflict to me is always healthy. Like, if there's no conflict, I feel like there's something wrong. I know that sounds weird, but like, not living in constant conflict. Yeah. But I think conflict is very good. It means we're challenging each other. It means we're disagreeing. It means we have different points of view. It means we, like we're trying to move forward. So I think the competition side of sports, it translates very well into business. You have to continue to work hard at your trade, at your craft, to get better. You can't get to a point where you think you have peaked. So that means we have to continue to learn, and we'll provide a lot of that learning, but you also have to take initiative on your own, maybe on a weeknight or a weekend, to learn and expand your skill set as well.
Yeah, I've seen that to be really true as well. And one of the points you made about conflict, I'd love to build on that, because I think that this goes back to some of the communication when you were describing, teaching your team how to push back when the client is in a space where they're actually not asking for what's best for them. Some of the roles that I play when I'm wearing my strategic consulting hat, that's why I'm brought in, because they want somebody that's not just going to say, be a yes person, but to say, what do you see that we can't see? What are those blind spots? And sometimes that's uncomfortable because it's a human resource issue, or it's did you notice what's happening over here on this team? Or you all said this was your vision, this is what we designed, but it's not being implemented in the way that you wanted. So you're not going to get the outcomes that you want. In that space of conflict, in that space where you can be transparent and clear and kind, but also direct, that I realized that really served me well in my client conversations, in holistic life, because what I found is if there wasn't conflict externally, it was happening somewhere. It was just maybe there was a pre-meeting where I wasn't included in the meeting and they were saying this or that. So why not get it out on the table and be able to speak clearly, even if it is uncomfortable in that moment? Because I think tension is the sign that something important is being worked out oftentimes. And if you can't quite get to that, maybe it wasn't actually a great meeting if nobody said anything but the leader and everybody just said yes. Well, what was the point of even, having the gathering?
If you know your partner, your friend, your client, if there's trust and you know that they have you have their best interests in mind, then everything after that should be easy. So if I push back on my client or I give them feedback, I always want to provide an explanation, right? Why do I believe this, right? Mm-hmm. And what is the impact of not taking action? And that is really how you have to approach it, is you have to be very clear with the why. Like, it's no different than me as a leader managing a team. Some things are democracy and some things are a dictatorship, right? So sometimes I'm always going to seek input and feedback from people, but at the end of the day, I have to do what I believe is in the best interest of the company, right? Yeah. And so it's the same with the client. And even though it's an unpopular decision and goes against what other people have asked me to do, as long as I provide an explanation as to why I did what I did, and I don't just make the decision without any explanation, right, it makes the difference. Then people can they may not agree with you, but they'll respect how you went about making that decision because you informed them, you communicated. So with clients, it's kind of the same thing. It's being very clear on why we don't agree with their point of view as the expert that they hired. Right? We are absolutely required to tell them if we disagree and provide why we disagree. Ultimately, they can overrule us and ask us to still move forward, and we will do that. But if we don't do that, then we're doing a disservice, right, to the client. Right. So it's really about, and that's how I think you build deep connections with people, is they respect that you push back, not just for the sake of pushing back, but because you felt it was the right thing to do and you were looking out for the business.
How do you see the impact of AI in your space?
We embrace AI, so we are not viewing it as something that will displace or replace the human capital side of our business. I think it's more of an enhancement. So it's a tool, and like any tool, you have to know how, when, and why to use it. And so we are, incorporating AI into sort of the business by way of, ChatGPT, and it's really around a lot of the content and creative side of our business where we're adopting a lot of the AI tools that are available. And the team is using it right now. What I do worry about as a father, as a business owner, is people going a bit too far with the reliance on AI and not critically thinking for themselves. Mm-hmm. So we're embracing it. We're on the train. We're talking about it with our customers. It's not that we're not pro AI, but I do think, like anything, you have to really be very balanced with your use of it. And you have to make sure that you're giving it the right inputs and that you're overriding it when necessary to get the best output.
And connected to that, and you can take this from the perspective of your own children, or as you think about folks that you hire, what skills would you say, like, to our parents or to people that are out there trying to figure out what skills they should develop? What skills are you most looking for when you're hiring or thinking about your own kids?
I look for more soft stuff, to be honest, like soft skills. So I look for the ability to communicate. How effective of a communicator are you? I look for your, attitude. What kind of attitude, work ethic, integrity, intelligence? Like, these are very general things I'm saying to you, but those are the qualities, characteristics, attributes I'm looking for in a person. I'm less worried about, like, when I give you an IQ test or we give these tests, and I've had people score really high in intelligence and they've come from really good schools, and that's great. And that's hard to do, right? But I need you to be more balanced. Like, I want you to be smart, but not so smart that that the team doesn't enjoy having lunch with you. Right? Yeah. So it's like the EQ, right? EQ, IQ. So I look for those things in terms of soft skills, communication, work ethic. I used to actually require a bachelor's degree or like college degree. I actually don't care anymore. I actually care more about your story, your journey. What did you do in lieu of going to college for 4 years, right? Like, you may have done something that's really impressive that impresses me more than having gone to an Ivy League school, right? So, like, I want to know, how are you using your time?
Borja, one of the things too, that I hear from our conversation and from just listening to other conversations you've had is that you're really playing this out, from what I can see, at 415 Digital, in the way you think about your personnel, in the way you think about your relationships with them, what you're looking for, and your clients. And so it just, that comes through, is really clear. So I think that's powerful.
Yes, thank you.
Where can people find you? Where can they learn more about 415 Digital? What kind of folks should reach out if they want to work together?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's ever interested as a business owner and needs some advice on digital marketing or where to start or has done digital marketing and wants us to come in and do an audit, we'll do that free of charge and just give you some advice. We do that all the time for people. It's kind of very enjoyable to look at different businesses. But you can go to our website at 415digital.com. That's FOUR15digital.com. There we have a lot of information about the services we offer, some client success studies, and then a form you can fill out. We'll get back to you. Also find us on LinkedIn or me on LinkedIn, Borja Cuan. And that's probably, we're good about getting back to people. So
wonderful. Borja, thank you so much for your time and your insights. I'm really excited for our listeners to hear this episode and the takeaways that you've shared.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
If you want to keep reflecting on this episode, subscribe to the Building Thinkers newsletter, where I share a blueprint for thought to help you turn insight into action. And if this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone else who you think might enjoy it, or leave a quick rating or review. That helps more thinkers find their way here. And in the meantime, let's continue to build thinkers.